morning, grade 5s. Happy Sunday and also happy May. Officially May, which means you are exactly about 2 months away from finishing grade 5, which is insane to me. I don't know about you, but I feel like time has just flown by since we've started e-learning. Like this is week 7 of your e-learning progress and process. So I think it's a lot to celebrate. So today we're moving on to learning about graphs. So far in this unit of statistics and probability, so we're focusing on the data part, we've looked at first-hand and second-hand data. Okay, I'm going to quickly review that because while Miss Rachel, Mr. Mann and I were marking the quiz from last week, a lot of you did really well, but there's still a few of you that do not get the difference between first-hand data and second-hand data. Okay, and really, I think you're complicating it for yourself. I think it is an easy concept, but I think you're making it more confusing than it needs to be. So remember, okay, let me review. Please pay attention, especially if you didn't do well last week on the quiz. First-hand data is any information that you can collect. So think about it. In your mind, you should be thinking, am I, me, can I find that information on my own without the help of anyone really else, right? That means, for example, I can find out information about my families. Yes, that's first-hand data. Can I find information about my friends? Yes, that's first-hand data. About people around in my community, maybe it's a small community, so my school, or people in my complex or my compound. That stuff you can do on your own. That is first-hand data. As soon as it flips, so that as soon as it's out of your hands, where you don't know all that information and you need help, that's second-hand data. So for example, if I asked you to say, find out things in a different part of the world, that's second-hand data. You're not in that part of the world. If I'm asking you to tell me things about from a different school, you're not in that school. It's second-hand data, right? So think of it, the question you should be asking yourself, can I attain this information on my own? And if I cannot, that's second-hand data. Okay, please understand the difference. I want you to, unless you got perfect on your math quiz, and maybe you got, I don't know, double check how you did. You need to understand first-hand and second-hand. First-hand data is information that I collected on my own. Second-hand data is someone else had to find it. So for example, last week we said, the level of vitamin C or the amount of vitamin C in fruits. I might know the amount of vitamin C in some fruits, but do I know the vitamin C in every single fruit in this world? No, I do not, right? That means I have to go online. Someone has done that study, someone has done that research, scientists or whatever, they have done that. I need to go find out whoever has done it. If you weren't the one asking the questions, again, maybe this is an easier way to think about it. If you didn't conduct the survey, it's not firsthand. If you conducted the survey, it's firsthand. So if you were the one asking the questions, if you can ask the questions, it's firsthand. If you weren't asking the question, it's secondhand. Okay, please understand that difference. If you're still confused, then message me or your teachers so that we can help you understand the difference. Because we're moving on now, okay? Now we're moving on to graphs. And today's lesson will be a quick review of what you already know. Very, very important lesson though. So this, it's of course, you're definitely going to continue watching, but you'll probably have like, oh yes, I remember that, and yes, you'll have aha moments because this is a review from things that you've learned in grade 4. But we need to know that you remember this before we move on, because if you don't know this, you're not going to understand the different parts of a graph. And that's what today's lesson is, understanding the different parts of a graph. Now, hopefully in your mind you remember what graphs are because you did tons of that in grade 5. So all you need for today is your math notebook, highlighter, and a pencil, right? That's all you need. So write down the date. It's May 3rd. The title is Parts of a Graph. Oh, and you'll need a ruler. Okay, a ruler will be really, really useful. I know you have grid paper. If you want to, you'd be really neat, or try to get a ruler if it's close by. And your I can statement is I can identify the 5 different parts of a graph. Please highlight that. So parts of a graph is your title. And our I can statement is I can identify the 5 different parts of a graph. Now, no matter, and you probably know that there's many different types of graphs in this world. You can draw different types. A scattered graph, a line graph, a single bar graph, a double bar graph. There are different types of graphs, but every single graph has to have these 5 things. So no matter what the type of graph is, and this year we're going to look at 2 different graphs in grade 5, but it always has to have these 5 elements, and we're going to look at what that is now, okay? Let's look at that. So, and this is where you can use your ruler if you need. I'll just try to do my best. Okay, so at first, and hopefully you remember this, the part of a graph, you always start, so think of the first thing, there's usually, it leaves some space here, there's always a nice L. Again, I apologize if my lines aren't super straight, I'm going to try my best, okay? But you've got grid paper, so you're in much better hands, and grab a ruler if you have. So you always have an L shape, always. There's no chance that you won't have an L shape for a graph, okay? And I'm going to draw this and I'll go through parts of it. Then, so I've got my L shape. Now, the reason I told you to leave a space here is because you always have, and think of it like when you do when you're writing a story, right? You always need to start with a title, okay? That is one element, and I'll write 1. You always have a title of your graph. Okay, you don't just have it, think of it like that, think of like a story, right? You can't just have a story with no title. It needs to have a title, and the title always tells us what the graph is going to be about. Okay, and I'm going to use this vitamin C question that I keep talking about, or actually I'll talk about the one that you guys use. So one of the common examples that you guys did Thursday, so remember on Wednesday and Thursday you had to ask your family members, you had to collect first-hand data. You went around your home and you asked a question to your family members. So a lot of you said favorite fruit, and maybe I'll keep that one. So you went around saying, what is your favorite fruit? Is it mango, watermelon, apples, or bananas? And then you found out you're the best one, right? Whoever, and maybe it was mangoes. I think one of my students said that their favorite was mango. They found out the family members love mango, and they didn't like bananas. So my title is, what would be an appropriate title for that survey or that question? Right? Would I be talking about animals? What is the favorite animal in my house? No, an appropriate title for that survey question would be, what is the favorite fruit in my home? Or what is our favorite fruit? It's always a question, okay? So title is usually, and I'll put in a bracket, it's your question. So do you remember how you made up a question? That is your title. So your title is literally the question. So as soon as you have a question that you're serving, that is your title. That's one element. That's one of the 5. Number 2, I'll try to go, yeah. Now number 2 is, and maybe I'll do this in red. Yeah, I'll do this in, actually let's do this in black. I apologize, I'm gonna draw that again. So, and that'll be my second one. This is in black, which are your axes. So this is my y-axis. So this one, going long, is y. And this one, my horizontal line, is my x-axis. Let me just go through all the parts, and then I'll do an example where I tell you what would I put in my x-axis, what would I put in my y-axis. Let me just do a quick overview of the 5, and then we'll do an example together. So that will be number 2. Number 2 is your y-axis, which is all, you cannot flip them. This is always y. When I was young, an easy way I thought of remembering is think of y, it's long, right? Think of y is long, x is short. So that's why the long end of the L is y-axis, and the horizontal is x-axis. That's part 2, okay? The third part, let me get red. The third part, and I'll put it over here, and maybe remember, there are always little ticks, little dashes drawn. Do you remember what they're called? And you always fill them in, but they're called, and I'll write it over here. Number 3 is the scale. That's the third element of a graph. So we've got our title, which is always your question. Number 2 is your x and y axes. Number 3 is you always have a scale, And again, like I said, I'll do an example in a few moments. Number 4 is you always have, and I'll just draw something here. And if maybe one was colored in, you always have a legend. I think most of you will remember that from grade 4. A legend, that's the 4th element of a graph. Okay, and the last one, which is, I mean, they're all really important, but the final touch, I'm gonna get green, and I'll put it in the middle all over here, is your data. And let me put an example, just since we're number, it's a little smaller. Number 5 is your actual data. Okay, so please copy this down while I just quickly review, and then we'll do an example. So there are 5 different parts of a graph, okay? Any graph, you have to have these 5 parts. I don't care what kind of graph it is. Right now I just drew a bar graph. But no matter the graph, you always have to have these 5 parts. Number 1 is a title, and that's always easy. It's the survey question you are asking. What is your favorite animal? What is your favorite fruit? What is your favorite place to go for dinner, right? That question is your title. So I would literally write, what is your favorite fruit, right? Number 2 is your y-axis, is the label, whatever goes here, and your x-axis. And I'll go over what you have to put there, but it's whatever you're labeling here and whatever you're labeling here. Okay, that's your x and y axis. Number 3 is your scale. Remember that we go up by numbers on our scale by a certain gap, and we'll talk about that, but it's always numbers written on our y-axis. Okay, number 4 is your legend. You may have a legend. Now this is the only one you may or may not use. It sometimes comes in place and sometimes doesn't, but I'll talk about that in a second. And the 5th one is your actual information, the data that you collected. So right, if I was doing that fruit one, I might have like 3 people that said mango, 1 person said banana, 2 people said apples, and 1 person. So that's the actual data, okay? That's most important, what you're putting in the center. Okay, so pause the video right now, copy this all down because I'm gonna erase it in a moment, and then we're gonna do an example and see what that looks like, what it looked like if I'm drawing a graph, and I'll just do a simple example before we start making them tomorrow. We'll start doing some actual graphings tomorrow, okay? So copy this down, and then let's look at an example together. Erase all of this. Okay, so now let's use that example, right? The fruit one. So yesterday, sorry, not yesterday, last week, like I said, all of you had to do one job on Wednesday and Thursday. You had to go around to your family members and ask them a survey question. And I'm going to use the what was your favorite fruit. So since that was my question, that's going to be my title. And I think my title is in purple. So I'm going to write, that's my title of my graph. That's where you start, number 1. What is your favorite fruit? That is my title, okay? And I'll label it again so that you remember. Number 1 is your title, which is, what is your favorite fruit? That was the question I was going around asking. That's my survey question. Therefore, it's my title. Next, if you remember, number 2 was my x and y axes. Okay, now let's talk about that, because that's, yeah, it's pretty strict. Okay, so remember, and I'll write it over here, number 2, and I'll write my y here and x here, right? This is my y and this is my x. Now, and again, hopefully you remember a little bit from grade 4, you will always have 2 parts in a graph. You're always comparing, not comparing, but you always have 2 factors, 2 things that are going on. In my story, or in my question, what are my 2 elements of this question? I have, obviously I'm gonna have fruits, right? So what is your favorite fruit? Okay, so obviously one of these would be fruits. I have to label the options. Remember in your tally chart you had the options. So one of these will be the options. The X is usually your option, right? So in this case, I'll put X over here. In this question, what were my options? Now, I don't remember exactly what you guys use, but I'll just say maybe I had mango, banana, and apple. Maybe those are my 3 options. Okay, that's my x-axis. Okay, that's my x-axis. On my y, now this is sometimes a little bit hard, but it's the other element. So now mango, banana, who was answering? The second part is the who, right? Who is answering this? So who is answering the questions in your home? Your family members, right? So your graph, your data, your bar graph is about your family telling us what their favorite fruit is. So here would be the number of people, right? It might be the number of family members, so we can say family members, or number of, let's say, I'm gonna write it like this, number of family members. Right, it depends, because I'm gonna, remember when you did your tally chart, you had 4 people like mango. So I'm gonna have to write 4 here, but what does this represent? The 4 people, my 4 family members. So what is that label? The title. So these are like, think of these as like subtitles. This is the main title, and these are kind of like mini titles. Okay, so you've got your fruit, and I can say that. We could say fruits. So that would be my 1 title. And the number of family members. Now, and that's where the 3rd element comes in, the scale. Now, the scale is where you have to make a decision. That's where you have to decide, what am I going to go up by? Am I going to go up by 1s, 2s, 3s? So am I going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Am I going to go 0, 2, 4, 6, 8? Am I going to go 0, 5, 10, 15, 20? What makes sense for this graph? So now take a moment. Now imagine, do you think I'm going to go up by 10s? 0, 10, 9, 8, sorry, wow. 0, 10, 20, 30, 40. Do you think I'm going to go up by 10s? Do you think that would be a wise choice? Because my job, I was asking this question to my family members at home. Do you think I'm going to go 0? So let's draw. You're always going to have to draw ticks and always start at 0. That's always the fact. You always have to start with 0. And then, because we have to spread it out. Okay, do you think it would be wise, and maybe I want to draw even smaller ones in between. Do you think it would be wise for me to go 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 for this graph? If you're saying no, you're correct. No, it doesn't make sense for me to go up by 10s. Why? Why is that not a good choice? It's not wrong, but it would not be the best option. You would not get full marks because, now, on average, most of you probably had, I don't know, maybe some of you have 4 members at home. Maybe you asked 5 family members, maybe 6. But it's very unlikely you asked 20 or 30 or 40 people, right? And if I'm saying this is 10 already, so if this is 10 and all of you asked maybe only 6 people, all of this would be a waste. And we don't want that. We need to use the space that we have. So for this graph, the best option, now it depends again for each family members, but I think most of us asked about 4 to 6 people. So the best option would be to go up by 1s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? That is more suitable. Now, if in your case, maybe you are living, a lot of your family members are at home, and maybe your grandparents were over and your cousins, or I don't know, and you had 10 people. That means you just have to make your graph a little bit longer. Okay, that's all. So I went from 0 to 8, which works for me. So that's number 3. That's your scale. Number 4 was your legend. Now, this is the only, so I'll put 4 here, legend. Now, we're not comparing anything. So in a couple days, we're going to be doing double bar graphs. So we don't need a legend right now. So I'm not even going to talk about the legend right now. I'm going to talk about it probably on Tuesday or Wednesday, so I'm just leave it. So we don't need number 4 just yet. I do need you to know what it is, and I'm sure most of you know what a legend is. We just don't need it yet because there's nothing we're comparing. There's nothing to compare, right? Now, for example, maybe I was comparing between boys and girls. Then you could have a legend, but right now we're not, so let's just leave it. And then the fifth element, which I think I did was green, I think, was my actual data. And maybe I'll just use brown. So now this is what you look at your chart. Remember that tally chart you had? So this is where you look at it. So now, how many ticks or how many did you tally up for mango? Now let's say, for example, I don't know, maybe someone had 6. So this would be my 6. I would draw a bar to represent 6 in the middle of mango. Okay, maybe there were 6 students. Then family members. Then maybe you had 2 family members like banana. So I'll go to 2. And don't worry, tomorrow I'm going to do in-depth examples. That'll be 2. And then maybe 3 people like apple. And that will be apple. And that is my bar graph. That's my data. This is number 5. Now don't get worried too much about making the graph. Tomorrow I'm teaching you how to make bar graphs and double bar graphs. But what I need you to understand for today's lesson, and I'm just wrapping this up now, is understand the 5 different parts. Okay? Tomorrow you'll understand even more because we're going to be making them. So I'm going to give you information and we're going to make it together. But today's takeaways, I need you to understand what are the 5 different parts of a graph. Let's quickly review before I sign off. So first is your title. You have to start off with a title. Think of it like a story. You need to have your introduction. What is the story going to be about? What is this graph going to be about? Number 2 is your X and Y axes. They're like your subheadings, okay? Because you're always talking about 2 elements of a story, right? So this was fruits, and you label the fruits, so the options. And a good trick is just remember the bottom is usually the options, okay? So my fruits, and then this is the heading. Now you need to, and again I'll discuss tomorrow, you need to label it, right? You can't just put the fruits there. You also have to say, oh, these are fruits. Okay? Then you have your y-axis, which is always the number. Think of it that way. It's always the numbers. Number 3 is your scale. You're choosing a scale that's always going up in a good range. 4, legend. That's the only optional one. Sometimes you do it, sometimes you don't. Okay? And then number 5 is your actual data. Okay? Those are the 5 different elements. Please understand that. Please copy this down. Tomorrow, we're going to start making our single bar graph and then a double bar graph, and then understanding how to make it, how to read it, what does it mean. Okay? So today I'm not going to ask you to do any work. Today I just really want you to understand, remember all these 5 parts, and then tomorrow we can get to making them. Okay? If you have any questions, whether it's about today's lesson, whether you're still confused about first hand and second hand, message me if you need any help, and then I'll see you when I see you. Okay? Take care. Have a lovely day. See you soon.